Get your filthy hands off that bed! If you're a janitor, you should be cleaning the floor with your black brain, not doing anything else. My father has 20 doctors. And you walk in smelling like bleach, thinking you can help?
Donovan Turner said nothing. His eyes stayed on the dying man. Tubes in every vein. Monitors screaming.
Get this stinking old man out of here! Security!
2 guards grabbed Donovan by the arms. The folded note hit the floor. No one picked it up. They should have. Inside those creases sat the only answer that could keep Grant Whitfield alive. And no doctor in that building knew it. They also didn't really know who that janitor actually was. This is the story of the man they never should have ignored, and the note that changed everything. Whitfield Memorial Hospital sat on a hill in Greenwich, Connecticut, behind iron gates and a row of white oaks that had been there longer than the building itself. It was the kind of hospital where senators recovered from knee surgeries and hedge fund managers flew in for annual physicals. The marble floors in the lobby reflected chandeliers. The waiting room chairs were leather. The coffee was French press. And the man who built it all was dying on the 4th floor. Grant Whitfield was 68 years old. He had made his first fortune in biotech, his second in pharmaceuticals, and his third by buying struggling hospitals and turning them into luxury medical centers. Whitfield Memorial was his crown jewel, named after himself, funded by himself, and now, ironically, failing him. 3 weeks earlier, Grant had collapsed during a board meeting. His skin had turned a faint copper. His hands trembled without stopping. His liver enzymes spiked, then crashed, then spiked again, in a pattern no textbook could explain. They brought in specialists, hepatologists from Johns Hopkins, neurologists from the Mayo Clinic, a toxicologist who had once consulted for the CIA. 20 doctors in total, flown in on Grant's private jets, housed in 5-star hotels, paid fees that could cover a teacher's annual salary for a single consultation. They ran every test, MRI, CT, PET scan, full metabolic panel, genetic screening, cerebrospinal fluid analysis. Each result came back either normal or contradictory. One doctor said autoimmune, another said heavy metal poisoning. A third suggested a prion disease so rare it had only been documented in 6 patients worldwide. None of them agreed. None of them were right. Victor Whitfield, Grant's only son, ran the hospital's operations. He was 34, Yale-educated, and had inherited his father's ambition without any of his patience. Victor wore tailored suits to the ICU. He called the nursing staff by their badge numbers instead of their names. He believed money could solve any problem, and when it couldn't, he believed louder money could. He had already fired 2 doctors for suggesting they transfer Grant to a research facility. His father would be saved here, in his hospital, under his watch. Anything less was an admission of weakness, and Victor Whitfield did not do weakness. Dr. Evelyn Shaw led the primary care team. She was 51, a board-certified internist with publications in 3 major journals. She had been Grant's personal physician for 9 years and had never lost a patient of his stature. The pressure was visible in her face, the sleepless circles under her eyes, the way she held her pen too tight during rounds. Shaw was competent. She was also terrified. Because for the first time in her career, she had a patient she could not diagnose, a family she could not calm, and a clock she could not stop. Dr. Nathan Cole was the youngest on the team, 29, a second-year fellow in internal medicine who had been assigned to Grant's case as an extra pair of hands. Cole was quiet, observant, and still idealistic enough to believe that medicine was about patients, not politics. He kept his head down. He took notes. And late at night, when the senior staff had gone home, he was the one who noticed the janitor. Donovan Turner had worked the night shift at Whitfield Memorial for 6 years. He clocked in at 10, clocked out at 6, and in between, he cleaned. He mopped the hallways. He emptied the biohazard bins. He scrubbed the operating room floors until they shone under the surgical lights. He was 42, broad-shouldered, and so quiet that most of the daytime staff didn't know his name. The nurses called him the night guy. Security called him D. Victor Whitfield didn't call him anything, because Victor didn't acknowledge people who wore coveralls. But Donovan had a habit that no one understood. Every night, after finishing his route, he would sit in the break room with a small leather notebook. The cover was cracked. The pages were filled with handwriting so dense it looked like code. Chemical compounds, cell diagrams, dosage calculations, arrows connecting symptoms to pathways that didn't appear in standard medical references. He never showed it to anyone. He never talked about it. He simply wrote, reviewed, and closed it before his shift ended. That notebook held 17 years of research, and the answer to what was killing Grant Whitfield was on page 43. It started with a word Donovan should never have said out loud. He was mopping the corridor outside the ICU at midnight when the door swung open. Dr. Shaw stood at the whiteboard inside, drawing arrows between liver enzyme panels, while 3 specialists argued behind her. Their voices carried into the hallway. The ceruloplasmin is borderline low, but it doesn't fit the hepatic profile. Because it's not Wilson's. Wilson's doesn't present with bilateral tremor and copper deposition simultaneously at this rate. Then what do you call a ceruloplasmin of 14 with Kaiser-Fleischer rings that appeared in 72 hours? Donovan's mop stopped. He didn't mean to speak. The word came out of him the way a cough comes out. Involuntary, unstoppable. Fulminant. 3 heads turned. Shaw lowered her marker. The room went quiet, the way rooms go quiet when something breaks. Excuse me? Donovan gripped the mop handle tighter. I said, it could be fulminant Wilson's, the acute hepatic form. It mimics rapid copper overload because the ATP7B mutation accelerates biliary excretion failure. That's why the ceruloplasmin looks borderline instead of bottomed out. The body's burning through it faster than you can measure. Shaw stared at him, not at his words, at his coveralls, at the mop, at the yellow bucket on wheels behind him. Who are you? Night custodial. I clean this floor. A specialist from Boston, Dr. Ray Prescott, silver-haired, bow-tied, the kind of doctor who introduced himself with his publication count, leaned back in his chair and laughed. Not a polite laugh, a laugh that fills a room and empties a man. Did the janitor just try to diagnose a billionaire? The other 2 joined in. Shaw didn't laugh, but she didn't stop them either. She turned back to the whiteboard. The door was still open. Donovan stood in the frame, mop in hand, illuminated by fluorescent light like a man on trial. That was when Victor Whitfield arrived. He had been watching from the nurse's station monitor. He walked down the hallway with the kind of stride that announces authority before a single word is spoken. His shoes clicked on the marble. His tie was knotted at 1 a.m. like he had somewhere important to be. What are you doing outside my father's room? I was cleaning the... You were talking. I heard you. I heard every word. Victor stepped closer. His cologne hit the air between them, sandalwood and money. Let me make something very clear to you, Donovan. You push a mop. You empty trash cans. You exist in this building because someone has to clean up after the people who actually matter. Donovan's jaw tightened. He said nothing. You don't speak to doctors. You don't look at charts. You don't stand outside ICU doors pretending you understand words you can't even spell. Victor turned to the nearest nurse. Log this. If he comes within 30 feet of the 4th floor again, call security. Actually, reassign him. Restrooms. Basement level. Effective now. The nurse hesitated. Mr. Whitfield, he was just... Did I ask for your opinion? She looked down, typed something into her tablet. Donovan was reassigned before 2 a.m. His new route covered the basement, the morgue corridor, the boiler room, the storage units that smelled of damp concrete and old gauze. The floors down there were cracked linoleum, not marble. No chandeliers, no leather chairs, just buzzing lights and the hum of machines keeping the building alive from below. He mopped in silence, but his notebook sat open on a supply shelf behind him, turned to a page covered in diagrams of copper metabolism pathways. arrows, dosages, a circled phrase in red ink. Maternal case, same progression, 23 days. His mother had died on day 25. Her name was Ruth Turner. She had been 51 years old, a school librarian in Baltimore who started dropping things in February and was gone by March. The doctors called it liver failure of unknown origin. They wrote idiopathic on the death certificate, which is the medical profession's way of saying, we don't know and we've stopped looking. Donovan was 25 then, a third-year doctoral candidate in molecular medicine at Johns Hopkins. His research focused on rare hepatic disorders, specifically genetic mutations in copper transport proteins. He was brilliant. His advisor said so. His peers said so. His published paper on ATP7B variants had been cited 41 times before it was retracted. The retraction came from Professor Harold Bennett. Bennett was 63, tenured, and had chaired the department for 11 years. He filed a formal complaint alleging that Donovan had fabricated data in his thesis, a claim supported by no evidence and investigated by a committee that included 2 of Bennett's former students. The hearing lasted 4 hours. Donovan presented his raw data, his lab notebooks, his methodology logs. Bennett presented his reputation. The committee sided with reputation. Donovan lost his funding. His doctoral candidacy was revoked. His paper was pulled from the journal, and the research that could have saved his mother, that could have saved Grant Whitfield 17 years later, was buried in a retraction notice that no one ever read. He left Johns Hopkins in a taxi with 2 boxes of belongings and a leather notebook he refused to stop writing in. For 17 years, Donovan Turner worked as a janitor. He cleaned hospitals, clinics, and medical offices across the East Coast. He took night shifts because the libraries were open during the day. He read every journal he could access. He attended free medical lectures at community colleges. He wrote in his notebook every symptom, every compound, every pathway. Page after page after page. Not because anyone asked him to, not because anyone would ever read it, but because his mother had died waiting for an answer, and he refused to let that answer die with her. And now, in the basement of a hospital named after the man his research could save, Donovan Turner mopped the floor next to the morgue and waited. He had written the note. He had left it on the bedside table, and they had thrown him out before anyone read it. The question was whether anyone ever would. Dr. Nathan Cole couldn't sleep. It wasn't the coffee. It wasn't the 70-hour shift. It was the word. Fulminant. The janitor had said it like a reflex, the way a surgeon says scalpel or a pilot says mayday. Not rehearsed, not guessed, known. Cole sat in the break room at 4 a.m., scrolling through PubMed on his laptop. He typed, fulminant Wilson's disease, ATP7B mutation, rapid copper deposition, atypical ceruloplasmin. The search returned 11 results. 4 were case reports, 2 were literature reviews, and 1, published 14 years ago, then retracted, was a thesis paper that described, almost word for word, the exact symptom progression Grant Whitfield was experiencing. The author's name was D. Turner. Cole read it 3 times. The paper detailed a variant of Wilson's disease in which the ATP7B mutation didn't simply reduce copper excretion, it reversed it. The body, instead of failing to process copper, actively redistributed it into organ tissues at an accelerated rate. Standard diagnostics missed it because ceruloplasmin levels appeared borderline rather than critically low. The copper was hiding in plain sight, bound to albumin, circulating freely, depositing in the liver, brain, and cornea simultaneously. The retraction notice was brief. Data integrity concerns raised by faculty review. No specifics, no rebuttal published, just a name erased from the record. Cole closed his laptop. He walked to the basement. He found Donovan in the boiler room corridor, wringing a mop into a yellow bucket. The fluorescent light above him flickered every 8 seconds. The air smelled of chlorine and rust. Your name is D. Turner. Donovan didn't look up. My name is Donovan. I work custodial. You wrote a paper. Johns Hopkins. ATP7B copper redistribution in fulminant Wilson's variants. It was retracted in 2012. Donovan's hand stopped ringing. Water dripped from the mop into the bucket. 3 drops. 4. He still didn't look up. That paper described exactly what's happening to Grant Whitfield right now. Every symptom, every marker, the ceruloplasmin pattern, the bilateral tremor, the Kaiser-Fleischer rings appearing in under 72 hours. Cole stepped closer. "Who are you?" Donovan finally raised his eyes. They were steady, not angry, not pleading, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from carrying something heavy for a very long time. "I'm someone who watched his mother die of the same thing." Cole felt the air leave his chest. "Ruth Turner, 51, Baltimore. She presented with hand tremors in February, liver failure by March. 23 days from first symptom to death. The doctors called it idiopathic. I called it what it was. And I spent the next 17 years proving it." He reached behind a supply shelf and pulled out the leather notebook. He opened it to page 43. The page was dense. Handwritten chemical equations, dosage tables, a flowchart tracing copper from ingestion through hepatic processing to organ deposition. At the bottom, circled in red, chelation protocol, modified D-penicillamine plus zinc acetate, staggered 6-hour intervals. Effective window, 72 hours from coma onset. Cole stared at the page. His medical training told him to be skeptical. His instincts told him he was looking at the work of a man who had spent more hours on this single disease than most doctors spend on their entire careers. "He's dying because they're looking at the wrong organ," Donovan said. "They keep treating the liver, but the copper isn't staying in the liver. It's moving. Brain, kidneys, heart. By the time the liver panels look critical, the damage is everywhere else. You have to chase it, not wait for it." Cole looked at the notebook, then at the mop, then at Donovan. "Why didn't you fight the retraction?" "With what? Bennett had tenure. I had a bus ticket." Cole exhaled. He took out his phone and photographed page 43. Donovan watched him, but didn't stop him. "I can't promise anything," Cole said. "I'm not asking you to promise," Donovan replied. "I'm asking you to run 3 tests. Urinary copper, 24-hour collection, serum-free copper index, and a brain MRI with copper-sensitive sequencing. If I'm wrong, you lose nothing. If I'm right, you save his life." Cole put the phone in his pocket. He turned toward the elevator. Then he stopped. "Why did you stay? Working here, cleaning floors. Why not leave?" Donovan picked up his mop. "Because this is the only hospital in the country with a patient who has what my mother had, and I wasn't going to let it happen twice." The elevator doors opened. Cole stepped in. The doors closed. Downstairs, Donovan wrung the mop again. The water had gone cold. Cole ran the first test at 5 a.m., while the senior staff slept. He ordered the 24-hour urinary copper collection himself, logging it under his own authorization code. The lab technician, a woman named Sheila who had worked the night shift longer than anyone in the building, looked at the order and raised an eyebrow. "Urinary copper? Nobody ordered that in 3 weeks." "I'm ordering it now." "This came from Shaw's team?" "It came from me." Sheila shrugged and processed the sample. Results would take 12 hours. Cole didn't wait. He requested the serum-free copper index next. This one was faster. A blood draw, a calculation, and a comparison against reference values that most doctors never used because most doctors never suspected what Donovan suspected. The result came back at 9:17 a.m. Serum-free copper, 38 micrograms per deciliter. Normal range, 10 to 15. Cole stared at the number. His hand trembled against the lab printout. The copper wasn't just elevated, it was catastrophically high, circulating freely in Grant Whitfield's bloodstream, unbound, unregulated, depositing into every organ it touched. The janitor was right. He pulled out his phone and looked at the photograph of page 43. Donovan's handwriting filled the screen. The protocol was specific. Modified D-penicillamine combined with zinc acetate, administered in staggered 6-hour intervals. Start within 72 hours of coma onset, or the organ damage becomes irreversible. Grant Whitfield had entered a semi-comatose state 16 hours ago. The clock was already running. Cole took the lab results to Dr. Shaw at 10 a.m. She was standing outside the ICU with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, reviewing a printout of Grant's overnight vitals. Her eyes were bloodshot. "I ran a serum-free copper index," Cole said. Shaw looked at him. "Who authorized that?" "I did." "On whose recommendation?" Cole hesitated. He could lie. He could say he read a journal article. He could say it was a hunch. But he had watched this team spin in circles for 3 weeks while a man died in slow motion, and he was tired of circles. "The janitor." Shaw's expression didn't change for 3 full seconds. Then it did. A slow collapse, like a building coming down floor by floor. Disbelief, offense, then something worse, contempt. "You ran a diagnostic test on a billionaire patient based on the medical opinion of a man who cleans toilets. His name is Donovan Turner. He published a paper on this exact condition at Johns Hopkins before it was retracted. The serum-free copper came back at 38. Normal is 10 to 15. He's right, Dr. Shaw. The copper is free-floating. It's depositing everywhere. And if we don't start chelation therapy within the next 56 hours, Grant Whitfield will die the same way Donovan Turner's mother did." Shaw set her coffee down. She picked up the lab printout. She read it. She read it again. "One abnormal lab value doesn't confirm a diagnosis." "Then let me run the third test. Brain MRI with copper-sensitive sequencing. If it shows deposition in the basal ganglia, we'll know. And if it doesn't? Then I'll drop it. But if it does, and you didn't act, you'll have to explain to the board why you ignored a treatable diagnosis because it came from the wrong person." Shaw stared at Cole for a long time. Her jaw worked. Her fingers pressed white against the printout. She was calculating. Not medicine, but politics. The risk of acting versus the risk of not acting. The risk of being wrong versus the risk of being right too late. "Run the MRI," she said. "And if you ever go behind my back again, I'll have your fellowship revoked before lunch." The MRI was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:47 p.m., Victor Whitfield walked into the imaging suite. "What is this?" The MRI technician froze. Cole stepped forward. "Your father's care team ordered a brain MRI to—" "I know what an MRI is. I'm asking why. Shaw's protocol doesn't include brain imaging. New lab results suggest we need to—" "New lab results from whom?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "This is the janitor's idea, isn't it?" Cole didn't answer. His silence was loud enough. Victor pulled out his phone. "I want Donovan Turner terminated. Today. Security escort off the premises. No severance. No references. I want him gone before my father's scan is finished. Mr. Whitfield, if we don't run this test, if you don't stop talking, you'll be gone too." The MRI ran anyway. Shaw had authorized it, and not even Victor could override a physician's diagnostic order without a formal complaint. He filed one, but hospital bureaucracy moved slower than copper through a dying man's veins. At 3:22 p.m., the images appeared on the radiologist's screen. Bilateral hyperintensity in the basal ganglia. Copper deposition confirmed. The pattern was textbook, or rather, it matched the textbook that had been retracted 14 years ago. 3 for 3. Every test Donovan had requested came back exactly as he predicted. Cole printed the MRI results. He placed them next to the urinary copper collection, which had also returned, showing levels 4 times the normal threshold, and the serum-free copper index. 3 documents, 3 confirmations. He carried them to Shaw's office and laid them on her desk without a word. Shaw looked at the papers. She looked at Cole. She looked at the wall behind him, where her framed medical degree hung next to a photograph of her shaking hands with the dean of Columbia Medical School at her white coat ceremony. "Who is he?" she whispered. "He's the man who solved this disease 17 years ago," Cole said. "And we erased." At 4 p.m., Donovan Turner's employee badge was deactivated. Security found him in the basement, mopping the morgue corridor. They told him to leave his equipment and follow them. He set the mop against the wall, put the leather notebook in his back pocket, and walked out through the loading dock. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He walked to the bus stop across the street, sat down on the bench, and waited. Grant Whitfield had 52 hours left. Cole didn't go home that night. He sat in the hospital library with his laptop open and a stack of printed MRI images beside him. He wasn't looking at Grant Whitfield anymore. He was looking at Donovan Turner. The search took 40 minutes. What he found took longer to process. Donovan Turner had entered Johns Hopkins at 21 on a full academic scholarship, one of 3 black students admitted to the molecular medicine doctoral program that year. His undergraduate GPA was 3.96. His GRE scores placed him in the 99th percentile. His first-year research on copper transport proteins earned him a departmental commendation and a co-authorship on a paper published in the Journal of Hepatology. By his 3rd year, he was leading his own research. His thesis, ATP7B redistribution variants in fulminant Wilson's disease, a novel pathway model, proposed that a subset of Wilson's patients didn't simply fail to excrete copper. Their mutations caused active redistribution. Copper moved. It migrated through the bloodstream and deposited in organs in a pattern that standard testing would miss because the biomarkers looked almost normal. Not low enough to alarm, not high enough to diagnose, just wrong enough to kill. The paper was published. It was cited 41 times in 18 months. Researchers in Germany and Japan referenced it in their own work. A team at Oxford began replicating his pathway model. Donovan Turner, at 24 years old, was on the verge of rewriting how the world understood Wilson's disease. Then, Harold Bennett filed his complaint. Cole found Bennett's faculty page. Still active, still tenured, still chairing the department 20 years later. His photograph showed a man with white hair and a smile that looked practiced. His list of publications ran 2 pages long, and the 3rd entry from the bottom was a paper on copper metabolism published in 2013, 1 year after Donovan's retraction. Cole opened it. He read the abstract. He read the methodology. He read the conclusion. His hands went cold. Bennett's 2013 paper used the same pathway model Donovan had proposed, the same copper redistribution theory, the same ATP7B variant classification. The language was different, restructured, paraphrased, filtered through academic jargon that made it look original, but the bones were identical. The skeleton of Donovan's work, dressed in someone else's clothes. Bennett hadn't just destroyed Donovan's career, he had stolen his research. Cole printed the paper. He placed it next to Donovan's retracted thesis. He highlighted the matching sections, 14 in total. 14 passages where the ideas aligned so precisely that coincidence was mathematically impossible. He carried both documents to Shaw's office at 11 p.m. She was still there. The coffee was fresh this time. Her hands were not. "Read this," Cole said. Shaw read Bennett's paper first, then Donovan's retracted thesis, then Bennett's again. Her eyes moved between the 2 documents like a pendulum. "Bennett was your mentor at Columbia, wasn't he?" Cole asked. Shaw didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her face answered for her. The slow drain of color, the way her lower lip pressed inward, the realization settling like sediment in still water. "He stole the research," she said. Not a question. He stole the research, retracted the original, and published it under his own name a year later. And the man who actually wrote it has been mopping our floors for 6 years. Shaw closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had shifted. Not sympathy. Shaw wasn't built for sympathy. Something harder, something closer to professional shame. "The 3 tests confirm the diagnosis," Cole continued. "Urinary copper, serum-free copper, MRI deposition, all consistent with fulminant-Wilson's variant. Donovan's protocol calls for modified chelation therapy, staggered D-penicillamine and zinc acetate every 6 hours. We have less than 48 hours before the organ damage passes the point of no return. Victor fired him. Victor fired a janitor. He didn't fire the only person alive who has spent 17 years studying this exact disease. Shaw stood up. She straightened her coat. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had never dialed before. The hospital's chief of medicine, Dr. Arthur Hayes, a man who answered calls at midnight only when someone was about to die or someone was about to be sued. "Arthur, it's Evelyn. I need an emergency override on a staff termination, and I need the board to authorize an outside consultant. Tonight." She paused. "His name is Donovan Turner. He's sitting at a bus stop outside our front gate." The black town car pulled up to the bus stop at 11:48 p.m. Donovan was still sitting there. His coveralls were damp at the knees from the last floor he had mopped. The leather notebook rested on his thigh. He hadn't opened it. He already knew every page by heart. The rear window rolled down. Dr. Arthur Hayes, 71, silver-haired, chief of medicine for 14 years, leaned forward. "Mr. Turner, I'm told you can save my patient." Donovan looked at him. "I can try." "That's not what Dr. Cole tells me. He tells me you've spent 17 years preparing for this exact moment." 17 years preparing for a moment I hoped would never come. Hayes opened the door. "Get in." The drive back to the hospital took 90 seconds. The walk to the 4th floor took 3 minutes. The confrontation in the hallway took longer. Victor Whitfield was waiting at the ICU entrance, flanked by 2 security guards and the hospital's legal counsel. His face was the color of concrete. His tie was loosened for the first time since his father's admission, the only crack in the armor he had worn for 3 weeks. "This man was terminated 6 hours ago. He is trespassing on hospital property." Hayes stepped forward. "The board has authorized an emergency medical consultation. Mr. Turner is here at my invitation and under my authority." "Your authority?" Victor's voice cracked at the edges. "My father built this hospital. I run it, and I am telling you, this janitor does not touch my father." "Then your father dies tonight." The hallway went silent. Nurses froze at their stations. A monitor beeped somewhere down the corridor, steady and indifferent. A security guard shifted his weight from one foot to the other, suddenly uncertain about which side of this he wanted to be on. Hayes continued, his voice low and even. 20 doctors have tried, Victor. 20. Your father's organs are failing in a pattern none of them can explain. Mr. Turner can explain it. He published the research. He identified the disease. And he has a treatment protocol that 3 independent lab results have already validated. You can let him try, or you can plan a funeral. Those are your options. Victor's jaw trembled. He looked at the security guards. He looked at the lawyer. He looked at the closed door of his father's room, where the ventilator hissed in a rhythm that was getting slower with each passing hour. He stepped aside. Not because he believed, because he was afraid. Donovan walked into the ICU at 12:04 a.m. He was still wearing his coveralls. He carried no briefcase, no stethoscope, no badge, just the leather notebook and the knowledge inside his own skull. Grant Whitfield lay on the bed like a man made of wax. His skin had turned a deep amber, the color of old copper pennies left in rainwater. His hands, once steady enough to sign billion-dollar contracts, were curled into fists that wouldn't unclench. The monitors showed what the monitors had been showing for days. Deterioration. Liver function at 18%. Kidney filtration dropping. Brain activity slowing. The copper was everywhere now, settling into tissues like poison into soil, turning a living man into a monument to his own metal. Donovan opened his notebook to page 43. He studied it for exactly 4 seconds. Then he closed it and set it on the windowsill. I need 4 things, he said to Cole, who had followed him in. D-penicillamine, 250 milligrams. Zinc acetate, 50 milligrams. A central line if he doesn't already have one, and 6 hours. He has a central line. Then start the D-penicillamine now. Slow drip, 20 milliliters per hour. We're not flushing the copper out. We're binding it first. If we push too fast, the released copper will overload the kidneys and kill him before the chelation works. Cole relayed the orders to the nursing team. Shaw stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching. She didn't speak. She didn't interfere. For the first time in 3 weeks, she let someone else lead. The first hour was quiet. The D-penicillamine entered Grant's bloodstream through the central line, molecule by molecule, binding to free copper ions floating in his plasma. Donovan stood by the bedside and watched the serum copper levels on the monitor. They didn't drop. They rose. "That's wrong," a specialist muttered from the back of the room. Dr. Ray Prescott, the same man who had laughed at Donovan 2 days earlier, leaned forward in his chair. "Chelation should reduce serum copper, not increase it." "It's pulling copper out of the tissues," Donovan said without turning around. "Bound copper enters the bloodstream before the kidneys can filter it. The levels will spike before they fall. If they don't spike, the drug isn't working." Prescott opened his mouth to argue. Then he looked at the numbers on the screen and closed it again. By the second hour, Grant's serum copper had risen to 51 micrograms per deciliter. Alarms sounded. The nursing team looked at each other with the kind of eyes that precede panic. Victor pressed his face against the glass outside the door, his breath fogging the surface in short, frantic bursts. "Hold," Donovan said. "Watch the urine output." The catheter bag was filling faster now. Dark amber fluid, almost the color of tea. Copper leaving the body the way it was supposed to. The kidneys were doing their job. Slowly, painfully, but doing it. At the third hour, Donovan administered the zinc acetate. "This blocks new copper absorption from the gut," he explained to Cole. "The D-penicillamine handles what's already in the blood. The zinc prevents reinforcements. We fight on 2 fronts." Cole nodded. He was scribbling notes faster than he ever had during rounds. Not because anyone asked him to, because he knew he was watching something that would never happen in a classroom. Hour 4. Grant's heart rate, which had been steady at 52 beats per minute for 2 days, suddenly dropped to 38, then 31. The ventilator alarm shrieked. The cardiac monitor flatlined for exactly 12 seconds. 12 seconds of nothing. Every person in that room stopped breathing. Shaw uncrossed her arms. Victor slammed his palm against the glass. Cole reached for the crash cart. "Don't," Donovan said. "He's in cardiac arrest. He's in vagal response. The copper is releasing from the cardiac tissue. The heart is resetting. Give it 10 seconds. Cole's hand hovered over the defibrillator paddles. His training screamed at him to act. His trust in Donovan told him to wait. The room balanced on a wire between 2 choices, and Donovan Turner stood at the center of it, perfectly still, counting in his head. 7 seconds. 8. 9. The monitor beeped. Once. Then again. Then a rhythm. Slow, irregular, but present. 42 beats per minute. 45. 48. The heart was coming back, beating its way through the copper that had been strangling it for weeks. Donovan exhaled. It was the first time anyone in the room had seen him show any sign of strain. His left hand trembled at his side, just once, before he steadied it. "Continue the drip," he said. "Same rate. Don't adjust." Hour 5. The serum copper levels began to fall. 51 became 44. 44 became 37. The urine output continued, dark, heavy, loaded with the metal that had been killing Grant Whitfield from the inside out. The liver enzymes, which had been swinging wildly for 3 weeks, began to stabilize. Not normal, not yet, but stable. A word that hadn't applied to Grant Whitfield since the day he collapsed. Shaw walked to the bedside. She looked at the numbers. She looked at Donovan, and for the first time she spoke to him not as a janitor, not as an intruder, but as a colleague. "What's the 6-hour marker?" "Serum copper below 25. Urine copper above 900 micrograms. If we hit both, The chelation is binding faster than the redistribution. We win. Hour 6. 6:04 a.m. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the room was already bright. Every overhead light on, every monitor glowing, every face turned toward the same two numbers on the screen. Prescott stood now. His bow tie hung loose. His arms were folded not in judgment, but in something closer to reverence. Serum copper, 22. Urine copper, 943 micrograms. Cole let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. A nurse covered her mouth. Shaw closed her eyes and nodded once, a single, tight motion that contained more respect than any sentence she had ever spoken. Donovan stood by the window. The first light of dawn was touching the white oaks outside. His reflection in the glass showed a man in custodial coveralls, hands at his sides, perfectly still. Somewhere in the parking lot below, a car door closed. Somewhere in Baltimore, his mother's grave sat beneath a headstone that read, Ruth Turner, beloved mother, cause unknown. It wasn't unknown anymore. At 7:12 a.m., Grant Whitfield opened his eyes. They were clear. The amber tint in his skin had already begun to fade. His fingers uncurled for the first time in days. He looked around the room, at the doctors, the nurses, the machines, and then at the man standing by the window in the blue coveralls. "Who are you?" Grant whispered. Donovan turned from the window. "I'm the night janitor, sir." Grant's eyes moved to the leather notebook on the windowsill, then back to Donovan's face. "No," he said, "you're not." "Hold on, I gotta stop here. 6 years mopping floors in a building where his own research could have saved lives. They laughed, fired him, stepped on his note, and he still walked back in. Would you? Honestly? Because I don't think I could." Grant Whitfield recovered faster than anyone expected. Within 48 hours, his liver enzymes returned to near normal levels. The tremors in his hands faded to a faint vibration, then stopped entirely by day 3. The copper-tinted hue of his skin lightened until it was just skin again, pale, lined, belonging to a 68-year-old man who had almost died, and now understood exactly how close he had come. Cole monitored the chelation protocol around the clock, following the staggered dosing schedule Donovan had outlined, down to the minute. The modified D-penicillamine and zinc acetate worked in tandem, one pulling copper from the tissues, the other blocking new absorption. By day 4, the serum copper had dropped to 11 micrograms per deciliter. Normal. For the first time in a month, Grant Whitfield's body was not at war with itself. On the 5th morning, Grant sat up in bed. He asked for his reading glasses. He asked for coffee. And then he asked for the folded note. Cole retrieved it from the medical records office, where it had been placed in an evidence bag after being collected from the ICU floor. The creases were deep. The handwriting was small and precise. A diagnosis, a treatment plan, and 3 recommended tests, written on a single sheet of paper torn from a leather notebook. Grant read it slowly. He turned it over. He read it again. 20 doctors, he said. I flew them in from 6 states. I paid them more than most families earn in a year. And the answer was on a piece of paper written by a man my son called a stinking old man and threw out of the room. He folded the note along its original creases and held it against his chest. Bring him to me. Victor, standing at the foot of the bed, opened his mouth. Dad! I didn't ask for your opinion, Victor. I asked for Donovan Turner. Bring him to me, now. Victor left the room without another word. His footsteps echoed down the corridor, slower than usual, heavier, carrying the weight of a man who was beginning to understand that authority and righteousness are not the same thing. Donovan Turner walked into Grant Whitfield's room at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. He was not wearing coveralls. Cole had left a set of clothes at the nurse's station, a white button-down shirt, dark slacks, shoes that didn't smell of bleach. Donovan put them on without comment. He left the coveralls folded on the break room table, next to the mop he would never pick up again. Grant was sitting upright, color returning to his face. The tubes were fewer now. The monitors beeped at intervals that sounded like health instead of emergency. He looked at Donovan the way a man looks at someone who has pulled him from a river. "Sit down." Donovan sat. "Cole told me everything. The research, Johns Hopkins, Bennett, the retraction." Grant paused. His eyes were wet, but his voice held. "He told me you mopped my floors for 6 years, that you watched me get sick, that you knew what was killing me before anyone in this building, and that my son threw you out before anyone read your note. Your son was protecting you. My son was protecting his ego. There's a difference." Grant leaned forward. "I've spent my career building hospitals, companies, systems. I have never, not once, seen a system fail a man the way this one failed you." Grant picked up his phone and made 3 calls. The first, to the dean of Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, requested a full independent review of the 2012 retraction of Donovan Turner's thesis. He named Professor Harold Bennett. He named the committee members. He offered to fund the investigation and publicize the results regardless of outcome. The second, to the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Hepatology, informed her that the retracted paper on ATP7B redistribution variants had been clinically validated on his own body. Continued suppression constituted a public health risk. The editor agreed to expedite review. The third, to his legal team, instructed them to prepare a civil suit against Harold Bennett for academic fraud, defamation, and intellectual property theft. The filing would be submitted within the week. Within a month, the investigation confirmed what Cole had already proven. Bennett fabricated the plagiarism complaint to suppress Donovan's research and republish the core findings under his own name. The committee that upheld the complaint had undisclosed conflicts of interest. Bennett's tenure was revoked. He resigned before the formal hearing, but the record followed him, the way records should follow men who destroy careers to protect their own. Donovan's thesis was reinstated, his doctoral candidacy restored, the paper republished with a correction notice, previously retracted due to unfounded allegations, original findings independently validated through clinical application. Dr. Shaw did not resign. Grant wouldn't allow it. "You stay," he said, "and you learn from the man you almost let die in your hallway." Shaw accepted the condition without protest. She attended every grand rounds Donovan led for the next year, sitting front row, writing notes in handwriting that had grown steadier. Victor Whitfield stood before the full hospital staff on a Friday afternoon and delivered a public apology. His voice shook. His hands gripped the podium. He called Donovan by his full name, Donovan Isaiah Turner, and used a word he had never spoken to a member of the custodial staff. He called him Doctor. "You know what gets me? The professor who stole his work kept his job 20 years. Promotions, awards, papers built on stolen ideas, while Donovan cleaned toilets. So tell me honestly, how many Donovans are out there right now, mopping floors, carrying brilliance nobody sees?" Grant established the Ruth Turner Foundation for Rare Disease Research, funded with an initial endowment of $40 million. The foundation's first hire was its director, Dr. Donovan Turner, appointed to lead the newly created Department of Rare Hepatic Disorders at Whitfield Memorial Hospital. His office was on the 4th floor, 30 feet from the ICU where he had once been forbidden to stand. There is a photograph on the wall of Donovan Turner's office. It hangs between his reinstated doctoral diploma and the framed correction notice from the Journal of Hepatology. The photograph shows a woman in a floral dress, standing in front of a public library in Baltimore, holding a stack of books against her hip, and smiling like the world had just told her a secret she already knew. Ruth Turner, 51 years old in that picture, dead 3 months later from a disease no one bothered to name. Below the photograph, mounted in a simple black frame, is a folded piece of paper. The creases are deep. The handwriting is small. The ink has faded slightly at the edges, the way ink does when it has been handled too many times by hands that believed in what they wrote. That note saved a billionaire's life. But it was never written for a billionaire. It was written for a mother who didn't get saved. For a son who was told he didn't belong in the rooms where saving happened. For every person who has ever carried an answer inside them, while the world told them they weren't qualified to speak. Donovan Turner was not a janitor who got lucky. He was a scientist who got erased. and refused to disappear. He spent 17 years in basements and break rooms, studying by fluorescent light, writing in a notebook no one asked to see, preparing for a patient he hadn't met yet. Not for glory, not for revenge, because his mother deserved an answer, and he was the only one still looking. 20 doctors couldn't save Grant Whitfield, not because they lacked skill, because they lacked the one thing Donovan Turner had more of than anyone in that building: a reason to keep searching when everyone else had stopped. The next time you walk past someone mopping a floor, pushing a cart, cleaning a window, remember this: you don't know their story, you don't know what they carry, and you don't know what they know. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment. Have you ever been underestimated because of how you looked? And if you haven't already, subscribe. The next story might be yours. Hashtag Justice for Donovan. Hashtag Talent has no dress code. Hashtag 20 doctors.